people will not understand you instantly or in sort of way. You'll have to work for years and decades before people can start and start. तो रिसर्च तब होता है जब आप इंस्टेंटली फूड की चिंता करने मत करिए. आपको मजा आ रहा है वही करिए. आपको अच्छा लग रहा है, you are convinced that I am going in a good direction, right direction, or right way. That is, this is okay. Okay, so we have just seen how did they get sovereignty? Their law established in American continent, then Australian continent. But the story for India is different. In India, in America, they applied discovery or occupancy, we call it. When they went to Australia, they applied terra nullis. But none of these theories were applicable in India. Because they found the story of Jahangir, Darbar, and Apart. They were baffled. And there was a political contingency that we have to appropriate it in both ways, not only the resources, but the political power. And the establishment of complete political power is connected to this doctrine. Immediately and ultimately connected to this doctrine. There was a case in 1859, and that is called, but its smaller versions did exist, is found to be found in many earlier judgments. But the categorical statement of this doctrine was in this Komachi Boy Sabha case, 1859. So here they had to invent an idea called Act of State. Act of, it's different from vicarious liability, so law of God, remember. Act of State. Okay, I must tell you here that till this time, the law of the land, and Baden-Powell clearly records it, even all historians, ancient historians, Ramsaran Sharma or Thapar or Pankavi, they all record this story that there are 3-4 views whether natural resource, land is a natural resource. No company can produce land. Neither can produce water. किताब कलम बना सकते हैं, कपड़े बना सकते हैं, मैन्युफैक्चर कर सकते हैं. These things cannot be. It also goes against capitalism. Basic tenets of that. So now it was a political necessity for companies that they have to acquire, and their interests laid in sovereignty over natural resources. But the law till this time was there are not contradictory, competing versions also available in different books. That patch of cultivable lands belong to group. Then there is what Lalan Gopal is a great writer from Allahabad. He wrote a very nice book. Then there is another view that land belongs to crown, ultimately. Then there is third view, no, land had individual owners. Individual owners. So this 3 views, we are talking of habitable, cultivable. Where land which has not been brought under human control, generally called wasteland or mountains, belong to king. So king can jagir de diya kisi ko. But the idea is unoccupied land. So tribal land could not belong to Canberra. This is or the king. So it was not wasteland. It belonged to. There is a famous story, you must have watched it, Chanakya. It says that you don't take rent. Sorry, you don't take rent because land does not belong to you. You get portion of individual or community products as, as tax in lieu of the services you provide. So you get remuneration, nothing else. You are a servant. You get remuneration. King gets so tax, idea of tax, and Eric Stokes has analyzed very beautifully. Tax or rent. That was a great debate because before this could happen, what I'm going to discuss now, that debate persisted for 30 to 40 years. That what is the share that company or company's government in India gets? Is it a rent? Because it's not a feudal order. So it cannot be rent. So if it is a tax, what is the capacity or what is the nature of tax? So there are a number of examples, including Chanakya's or such. The king gets remuneration for the protection he affords or the services such as canal or roads he provides or the other services to come. So it's not. So that quite different social orders. So that's why they had this problem and they had to innovate common law itself. The common law could not answer this problem or provide solution to this problem. So idea was in Kamachi Boya Sabha, they invented theory of act of estate. Act of estate simply says that when one state has acted for another state or another state's people or things or subjects belonging to another state, then the state which has acted, its own courts have no jurisdiction to examine validity of those actions. Those actions. Consequently, it gives unlimited power to the acting state to do anything in the state in which it is acting, the other state. So it can abolish all laws. It can abolish all titles. It can make any law. So simply, it comes down that act of the state through war or conquest results into abolition of the social order itself. Social order itself. So the law or legal order can be renovated. Can be renovated. In Kamachi Boy Sabha, the issue was same. Some property was taken over by the Grizzly Street, which was not under the sovereignty of the crown or company. So that property was demanded by that Sabha and compensation was demanded. The court invented the idea of act of state. You have no remedy and we have no jurisdiction over this order. Had you been our own subject within this territory, then we could have entertained. Then sovereign immunity or vicarious liability, still in initial stages of it, that could have applied. This theory was again restated in Nayak Vasanji versus Secretary of State 1924. And in post-colonial world, the constitution adopted it. Nowhere it is clearly written, but the course is made to Article 300.
Cannot be challenged fully because
We have to go at a deeper level. Except article, that is fine. That is also given in your IPC section 6 or so. But what about what Japal Singh was saying? What about the basis of forest laws? Mountain laws that mineral resources. There are several laws in forest. The basis is this. Since then, the theory. Now, what I want to highlight that if you look at what was law before that, even with respect to this subject. there is no distinction between in ancient and medieval law between municipal law, domestic law of a kingdom or a state, and law of nations. There is a reading or reading material. I think it is incorporated. What I mentioned, kite model, that is developed on a wrong, I believe, foundations of understanding of Indian system. Minsky says that legal pluralism can be understood with the help of a kite image. So every kite has four corners. One corner remains at the apex, and the second, the third, and the fourth one. Warner Minsky develops the idea that the dharma is at the highest. If you look at the Indian pluralist society, then there is human rights or something, a custom, and then the positive state law. But this understanding is a misconception. International law, when he keeps international law or international human rights as one part, but in Indian context, there are many verses, almost all Vyavahara or Dharmasastra, Smritis prescribe similar law. If a king has conquered another kingdom, king has conquered another kingdom. So here the dharma is used as law, compendium term. He is bound to administer that territory according to dharma of established dharma of that land. That land. He cannot change anything. He cannot change anything. Now look at the act of state. It's exactly opposite, which develops by the British. You got this point? If one king conquers another, so neither the discovery, neither the conquest, nor the secession or whatever treaty gives right to the conqueror to change law of that territory, which it has conquered. Rather, he is bound by dharma to rule that law according to that dharma, not your dharma. That law, not your dharma. So look at a contradictory law, because this rule was known to Britishers. This rule was very well, by the time they had already started doing Dharmasastra translation. General law had 21 pandits. What was the name of that law of Gentoo that had already come? So they had to develop a new invention. At the same time, look at the doctrine of lapse, its political counterpart. Act of state का political counterpart था doctrine of lapse, which was first of all articulated sometime in late 1920s by utilitarians, Stokes, and that was applied by Dalhousie and his successor with respect to princely estates. With respect to princely, so this can be seen as an exact manifestation of act of state doctrine into political sphere called doctrine of lapse. We all know about. Now, when we these kind of doctrines, political contingency was different in America, was different in convenience, was different in Australia, and in India offered a different situation, because here was a good, well-structured society and law as well. Law. So that law legal system may not be treated a system of law in the similar sense they had by now developed in the past. But that's a different point. What we call a system, what we call a law, that comes to the problem of definition, but we are in the territory of smaller ideas. We are trying to learn from smaller ideas. So that's how entire natural resources were acquired. A power over natural resources were acquired, or justification were provided. So far, any question? Can I ask some questions?
So then passing of Indian forest starts with 1927.
Yes, 26 or 27.
27. It is actually on the premise.
No, there were predecessor act also. 1880s. There are 2-3 predecessors of this act, and but they have to make money. And unless this is authorized, and unless Indian practice was drawn up, that's what Sirija Parsi was shouting, he shouted anytime, he said that you should abandon colonial development, which is against tribal traditions or tribal life. It was convenient, it might be convenient for new rulers, Indian rulers, so they continued it. It still continues. It still continues. So look at the Forest Dwellers Rights Act 2016.
Yes.
It has not changed the basis. It cannot change the basis because our constitution is framed like that basis.
Do you think that now the Land Acquisition Rehabilitation Resettlement Act of 2013, which is the amendment bill is pending, and it will provide 100% solatium and other concept, we're departing from the doctrine of Act of State?
No. They will be part of it only to justify the claims, so-called theories of rights, because हमारा constitution right है, उसको justify करना पड़ेगा. Therefore, these piecemeal look of progressiveness, कि हम progressive हैं, कर रहे हैं, that is coming. You remind me another example. This question, land ले लिया, सड़क बनाया. Do you have any example where Indian employers used to tax for walking on road? For example, I have to.
What would be
No. Indian ruler. So Ashoka is said to be one of the greatest emperor who built infrastructure. But in medieval time, Sheikh Sasuri from Bengal to Lahore. Do you have you ever read that he used to tax people? No? Chungi, that's a different point. Treating people, entering the territory.
People who were non-Muslims were taxed even under the guardianship and protection of a Islamic state.
That's a different question. We are talking of general law. There may be deviations. इसने आया non-Muslim पे लगा दिया, उसने आया Muslim पे लगा दिया. These are abstractions or retractions. Political consistency की compel करो, चलो हमारे पास आओ. It's something. But we don't care. अभी यहाँ से दिल्ली जाओ, आप जाओ या एक रिक्शा पुलर जाए, सबको बराबर टैक्स लगेगा. वैसा इक्वलिटी जवाब दे. Which idea of equality can answer this? It's a moral problem, not merely a practical legal problem. There is no instances. Similarly, I have talked to many people, historians also, finding out distinction between famine and hunger. What is famine and what is hunger death? Are they similar? They're different. What explanation can distinguish them?
Famine is natural.
No, sometimes it can be man-made famine. Bengal famine, 17 कब का है? 17. 18.
like cholera can be a man-made.
Man. So, it can be. I'm saying sometimes famine can be man production, product of structure of the social order or legal order or political. But in general, explanation goes that famine is natural. It's not generally, in general, product of social structure. It's not produced inadvertently or inadvertently. But hunger deaths are product of social structure, where inclusion and exclusion with respect to access or distribution to something is consciously built. Hunger death is a social product, man-made, creation of legal order. In ancient and medieval India, we hardly find any instance or recorded a record in history or history books that famine used to have. Famine used to have. No. Because social structure was such that no one can die out of hunger. It happened. Sure, in many ways, I agree, I don't deny. But there may be many things that we can learn from. Practices that we can develop in modern times. Education, I have already told you. New education policy says competition. मुझे बड़ा मजा आया जब मैं ड्राफ्ट न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी पढ़ रहा ये 19 का 2019 में ड्राफ्ट न्यू एजुकेशन and that extended in 160 or 70. The final version is only 60. But when I looked upon draft and do some research, it had one single word or its variation more than 1,000 times for competition. For competition. Each word, yeah, it's synonyms, more than 1,000 times used. No one does that research. Who? Do you know what is the basis of new education policy? Anyone? Monetization is good, but no, what is the predecessor? What is the father of new education policy?
Holistic approach, employment center.
No, there is a report called Ambani Birla report, 2002. So, आपका planning आया 50s, 48 से शुरू हुआ. Planned economy. It had its predecessor in Bombay Plan, 1944. किसने बनाया था?
The factories to that.
बिरला ये शिवराम इंडस्ट्रीज के फादर थे. अंबानी उस समय टाटा in business houses, 4 or 5 business houses of course. They had developed, they were friends of Nehru, the oligarchy or different leaders. So they developed, and there is a very nice book, Political Economy of India by Pranav Vardhan. Political Economy of India by Pranav Vardhan. Read it. The second edition was published in 1999. First edition 1996. So I find a very close analogy or similarity what happened in late 40s and what is happening in 1920s or 20s. That was with respect to economic planning, and this is with respect to. So what they did in Bombay Education Plan, Bombay Economic Plan, what they said was implemented by the government of India through industrial policies, 48, 56. Then first plan, second plan, third, fourth. That was, and that was built around a very minutely crafted system of exclusion कि हम 5-10 लोगों के अंदर कोई नहीं आएगा और जो हम नहीं कर पाएंगे पर हमारे लिए जरूरी है सरकार करेगी, है ना? Heavy industries, monopolization, reserved industries, and such. A similar report was published with respect to education. 4-5 pages का है, internet पे मिल जाता है. Birla and Ambani, 2002. Education plan for India. Essentially, the new education policy is adoption of that basis. And it says that the education has to be essentially the fundamental basis of the document 4.5 is that the education has to be a market basis, political exigency, and where it might not be lucrative. Government must go in and do education, schools, government, rest leave it to the monetization. Rest leave it to. So look at new education policy and even seventh big commission. These all compels every government institution, education institution also to raise revenue. हम इतना देंगे 30% को जनरेट करो, फी बढ़ाओ, कुछ करो, नए कोर्सेज बेचो, है ना? हाँ, that is part of it. It is part of it. So, okay, in that sense, so that's how we see a continuity. British period, that is company period till now. With the rest, and we also in a shallow manner, we criticize capitalism. No, we don't have to criticize in that way. We have to look and go more deeper. How did it happen and what is happening? Is it really changing? So every judgment will keep telling you this is charity, this is charity, this is charity. Every judge, every lawyer, even in that judgment, and every audience knows that this is profit, this is profit. Everyone knows. Profit. Nothing else.
The fast is because I was reading an article in the newspaper which says that though they intend to give, especially in reference to land has been a very debatable issue when we refer to its development constitution. So it says that if the legislature does not have intention to give something, that despite creating a law, they will not give. And even Supreme Court will ensure that the state will prevail. So this act is a fine example. They say you cannot take multi-crop land. मल्टी-क्रॉप लैंड ले रहे हो तो उसी के बराबर का लैंड उसको दो जो वहां पे वो उसको रीसेटल एक्सप्लेन करो क्योंकि आपने उसका लैंड स्नैच किया तो वो उसको कुछ आता है नहीं किसान को क्या आएगा वो क्या करेगा पैसा मिलेगा कष्टेगा like we have two Gurgaons new and old so they'll get money what they do is so this is the plan which is being criticized in अभी हिमाचल का बड़ा क्रिटिसिज्म हो रहा है वहां से अथॉरिटी ने ढाई ने उनको यहाँ पे इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए they gave 900 crore of that was spent on administrative infrastructure for developing of acquisition land model, which was the solution to be given to the people. What they do is, अब मुझे आपको आपके land के लिए 5 crore देना है. I'll take the circle rate. So they, before acquisition of land, they reduce the circle rate.
Every time.
Every time they do that. And by that sense, they have not even provided selection. On paper, everything looks very perfect. In Himachal
There are
government,
many instances where Supreme Court has upheld such activities of the government, which alone come here. The legislative power could be सकते. We cannot question wisdom of the legislation if there is illegality, not illegality. You cannot. The ulterior motive of legislation, a legislator cannot be judged by a court. That's how it survives. The common law technique of the justicing. Okay, so we were on famine. So famine is more or less humans have little power. Okay, sukha aa gaya, many things. In older times, it was under little control of human beings. Now, up to jada canals. But hunger deaths are directly product of social systems. This is the macro analysis, and in a way, it is a reductionist point, but this is important. If medieval or ancient India does not have hunger, and if under this constitution 70 years, suicide by farmers is similar to hunger, and you can put them both under the same criteria. Every day it is happening. Now, then it might be said that this constitution is not better one or does not establish a better social order or advanced social order than the previous whatever irrational or irrational order existed in. There are arguments you can say. So now the idea is why and where these things are happening. Do they have relation to the way common law developed in India? So we have seen that the common law itself developed out of the political contingency. India mein jab aaya. In fact, this doctrine for act of the state developed in India for the first time was applied all over British colonies. So you have South Africa, South Uganda or some. The Greek versus Cook, something like. Later on, it was applied the Trade Council to that country also. And then it became part of common law. In fact, Rajasthan case and Kamachi Bai case is clearly referred in those cases, appeals arising from South African colonies. So what was invented in India out of political contingency became part of common law itself for its own territories, other territories. Okay. I wanted to speak something about idea of liberty. For that, permanent settlement, individual pairs, sovereignty. There was a great show and Philip Francis, who was that was a stream of thinking in France, and that is also related to French Revolution. फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन में आपको पता होगा अगर आपने पढ़ा है बिल्कुल एक नॉवेल है The Tale of Two Cities. It very beautifully depicts brutalities and how Jacobins acted in France. But छोटा सा है चार्ल्स डिकेंस Tale of ऐसे काटा जाता किनको काटा basically that that was a school based school of that influence Ramachandra sorry Ranjit Guha say that these people influenced Cornwallis because Cornwallis was a mercantilist. He wanted a free trade competition. Unless society villages were destroyed, competition will not come in. The idea of competition was absent. Idea of competition as a norm of social order was absent in India, and that can have many repercussions. How we look upon group, connect to each other. So that may have origin in tribe, clan, or kinship, or village sentiment. So unless this normative thing, cultural thing was broken, they cannot or they could not establish mercantilism or capitalism. So before that it could be done, Physiocrats believed that unless land becomes a commodity, sellable. So there were many restrictions in India. You cannot sell land, even it is individual ownership. You cannot sell it. So, Ram Sharan Sharma, Hare Sharma says there are three methods of production, systems of. One is capitalist mode of production. Then you have a socialist mode of production, a state controlled, and he calls Indian system a Jajmani system of production. Jajmani, Jajman sab suna? Jajman North India mein popular hai. That challenge, and Chhatrapati Singh, there is a great writer. I think India's best legal mind. Bad at it. He's one of them. Was in Ireland. Professor Chhatrapati. He says that the idea of right itself, and this was also advocated by Gandhi and P.V. Khan, a great writer. Panduranga Vaman Kane. The idea of right is unsuitable or not suitable to Indian psyche of India. So, Chhatrapati uses the term that the right, the way it developed, idea of right. I'm not talking of any one right. Idea of right. A better book is Tom Campbell. Don't study wardrobe. Jeremy wardrobe थोड़ा सा tough हो जाता है, तो वो भी अच्छी. Theories of right. उन्होंने लिखा है Jeremy wardrobe में theories. But Australian scholar is I think it's Tom Campbell. The title of the book is simply Rights. आपके CRL में मैंने वहाँ से जगह सुनाई. बहुत छोटी सी book है but मजेदार. So when Chhatrapati criticized, when Chhatrapati has concluded writings against Hoffet, and which appears to be more convincing than Hoffet. Well, I like it. So what he said that the Jajmani system was based on cooperation and connection, sentiment. So I don't right कहते थे ये मेरा है. That means that I have the right to benefit or draw benefit from it, and you all have duties to keep up. Exclusive. So my right is a source of benefit for me and burden for all of us. That is how Hoffelian analysis works. That's how claim right in a strict sense and duty in opposite. Well, correlated, sorry. It is this binary and exclusivity binary that in which Western theories of right develop. In Indian system, so idea is if A has right, then he has no but. All others have but, right? Duty. But duty is a but. That can be moral or psychological or economic, many kind of psychologically more important psychoanalysis of law. branch है जो यहाँ नहीं हुआ है. Eric Fromm is a very nice writer, a great writer. Eric Fromm, F-R-O-M. Eric Fromm. Psychoanalysis करते हैं. Stephen King but उससे better मुझे बोलना है वो to have and to be. Title is to have. क्या जीते हैं आज के जमाने में? Have or to be. It's a fantastic. So, okay. If you look at and accept Ram Sharma's analysis, then suppose this land is mine. I have cultivated it. I have right. But it's a duty on a burden on a no. System in a cooperative system, it happens that it's a source of benefit for me, but at the same time, it is a burden for me. At the same time, it's a duty. I have a claim in this land, right in a strict sense claim. But at the same time, I have duty. Ye baat Westerns cannot understand. Westerns cannot. That the claim and duty can exist in the same person at the same time, with respect to the same object or some object. Same person. So, good example, I think, is because that can happen only in a society which is not based on competition, which is based on cooperation and sharing of sentiment or burden. So, एक सिस्टम होता था, अब तो शायद खत्म हो रहा है. मैंने देखा दो में से a farmer in the village who grow crops, and when the crop is ready, there are 10-12 people in the village, kind of people who will come and reap the crop, his crop, and take it away to their home. वो गोभी हो सकता है, नाई हो सकता है, बनवाड़ी हो सकता है, water हो सकता है, चचेरा हो सकता है, पुलाव. There are many people, 10-12, more than 10-12. उपजाया तुमने, तुम्हारी जमीन थी, अब ये तैयार है, वो काट कर लेके on their own will हमें इधर से चाहिए. Because for the whole year, these people have helped you. That is what R.S. Sharma calls Jajmani system. So there is no competition. There is sharing, there is a cooperation. वो में भी सिखाते हैं, compete करो नहीं तो नीचे रह जाओगे. ग्रेड से मशीन बनाता है. 95% होना चाहिए, 99% होना चाहिए. Even music education policy is full of this idea. So how to bring and displace this new model of social order or so-called modern legal order? That is a problem. This is not possible in one life. It may be worked and incrementally some parts can, some things can. So I remember in 2015, there was Sudhir Agarwal, a judge in education itself, in High Court of Allahabad. So there was that case related to ad hoc teachers in schools and the other. So the whole gamut of a state of government education and government schools came in. So he passed an order. He thought, in judgment clearly says, that there are three kinds of schools for children. There are elite schools, and there are average. These are all in private sector, public, so-called public. And there are then schools for poor people, government schools. Now, the lot of government schools are bad or pathetic because of the bureaucracy. They don't want it to grow. They send their children. So he passed an order that all government employees who is drawing salary from government anyway, must send their children to a government school and nowhere else. If this is not complied with, they must be fined by appropriate. No, the government did not do it. Nothing was done. So it has to exist side by side. Ultimately, new education policy opens door for everything. Even the institutions, higher order, which is in so-called public government, they are permitted to apply PPP with private partners for raising money, raising revenue. So the idea of right, which forms a foundation of writing of income. Individual is the building block. Individual is the building block. In older society, individual cannot be building. Can be a community or village. So, right. Now, the problem which I earlier referred, how and why. Earlier it was not so. Seat vertically went up to the apex of all social institutions. The idea is this, that when social order or a group whose need to grow was organized as business communities or tribes or clans, an idea of cooperation, not competition. An idea of fine right, hoga, whatever term it might be known by, but duty mainly that existed in him or her at the same time. So that compelled or that made it feasible for thousands of years to live together on a different basis, different principle. That was destroyed through market system and which brought idea of right, individual right. Who says possessive individualism? McPherson, Canadian political philosopher. McPherson. He says we live in a state of possessive individualism. Possessive individualism, where I will not go in much detail, but each biological entity, individual, regards himself or herself as a complete being, needing no assistance or no connection to other. At the same time, looks upon other as an enemy. Competitor enemy होता है. Competition का synonyms देखो. क्या synonyms क्या होते हैं? झगड़ा, quarrel, envy, jealousy, war, conflict. ये सब ये सब इसका synonyms होता है competition. So each is as an isolated, complete island. एक दूसरे से खतरा हमेशा रहता है. कैसे साथ रहेंगे? एक पावरफुल एंटिटी चाहिए. वो कहाँ से आएगा? स्टेट. चलो इसको समझो. That's how state acquired its present status. Then the whole entire plurality of law and many other things also down. Simply went down. Now we each state demand. There is a former judge of I think chief justice. Nothing central. US, UK, he retired. He talks about laws standing empire. Laws empire, Dr. Nelika. Laws empire, it's the main book on our doctrine. He modifies that and he says laws standing empire. That our social order has become such that every day we demand security, subsistence. Please, we are not demanding security, we are demanding more and more law from the state. More and more law from the state. We all know that very well in law. Absence of law is freedom. Absence of law is freedom. Or freedom can exist only under the silence or absence. But that is also a misconceived idea. That's what I would say at the end. Look at here, liberty, or it is also called privilege. Thomas Hobbes, liberty exists in the silence of. This In fact, I have mentioned. Thomas Hobbes was a naturalist, natural law philosopher. Mill and Bentham, who happens to be the executive or legislator for India, they are the utilitarians. Utilitarians used to hate natural law philosophers. Bentham तो बहुत गालियाँ भी देता था. But utilitarians themselves used Hobbes' theory of sword to capture India, or particularly that act of a state theory. Act of a state is based on sword, idea of sword, a mighty sword that is sovereign. Yeah. Hobbes had it. So when it comes, there are many instances you will find that the competing groups for utilitarians or naturalists or so-called left or Marxist, when it comes to a point, they start sharing without telling it, the basic premises. And we people keep thinking that these are different philosophies. So that's a different story. Okay. Hobbes, when we talk about freedom or liberty, he was the first person who popularized this idea, liberty exists in the silence of law. That is, till the time on a particular subject, the lawmaker or the lawgiver has chosen not to make law, chosen not to give law. To what? In fact, the destroyer of Austin is called Hart. Both share this idea that essence of law is duty. तो duty जहाँ होगा freedom का दोनों एक दूसरे negation एक दूसरे को negate करते हैं और Freudian analysis में भी duty और liberty diagonal arrow से connect होते हैं. That is one negates or cancels the other. One negates or cancels the other. Look at here. Here. Look at duty and liberty or freedom. Liberty can be said to be freedom or privilege. They are diagonally connected. That is one cancels or negates other. Now, this is a very nice idea. Every given part, they all agree. But Kelsen also believed similarly that liberty is an extra legal phenomenon. So we don't have to bother much about idea as a jural element or law, elements of law, building blocks of law. That bricks a banana, that is raw material. Roscoe Pound also believed in similar. But let me tell you, look at this example. X is a rationalist. Rationalist. That is an object or thing. चलो हीरे की अंगूठी है ये. पड़ी है. हीरे की हार पड़ी है. Heap of gold. But it belongs to no one. It is ownerless. What is the law?
Person who
Person who
find that thing will be the
first,
owner.
That is takes possession. The possession, taking possession is one of the way to get
Ownership.
ownership. Title proof is one of the mode of acquisition of owners. Okay? So A and B दोनों खड़े हैं. दोनों जा रहे थे, चलो दोस्त हैं या strangers हैं. So as per law, both are free. So both are free to run faster than the other. वो दोनों को एक ही बार नजर पड़ी है. Simultaneously देखा है. So what is the element that is available in A or B? Liberty है, freedom है ना? That depends on his choice. So A might decide चलो दौड़ के ले लेता हूँ. He might say हमारे पास बहुत पैसे हैं. Right. That is the core freedom, both ways. Also. That is the true freedom. Now, the same is available to B also. B also, but it is diagonally connected liberty to duty. So if A decides to choose an option, make an option, a choice and run, then the B has duty. How his choice of A is protected. अगर उसने डिसाइड किया कि चलो मुझे दौड़ना है, ये मैं ही लूंगा. How this system of A is protected. Law at the same time imposes criminal or civil duties on B or anyone else, all of us. भाई वो दौड़ रहा है तुम उसको रोकना मत, कान मत, गोली मत मारना. These all are specific crimes or wrongs, civil wrongs. नहीं, ऐसा मत करना, टांग में टांग फंसा के गिरा दिया मैं लूंगा. धमकाना मत, ज्यादा तेज दौड़ा तो मैं टांग तोड़ दूंगा. These all are crimes or civil offenses, civil wrongs, resulting into consequences. No? The same is true for B. Same is true for B. Now, just reverse this. X is profit. X is not a rational, yes, but it's a profit. Your what we call business. Applies. Same example. The profit के लिए दौड़ रहे है ना, दौड़ रहे हैं ना. अब किताब बेच रहे हो, मैं भी बेच रहा हूँ. अब मुझे ये नहीं धमका सकते कि 2 रुपए कम में मत बेचो. कंपटीशन है ना. Is there a law? Look at this example. दोनों का घर है, एक दूसरे के घर पे झांकने से मना करता है. If there is no law, नहीं मना करता. चलो सपोज की शादी हुई है, नहीं नहीं, ये तो बड़ी क्यूरियोसिटी है ना? जानता, ये बहुत बुरा लगा, तो मैंने ठीक से नहीं देखा. He might take steps or ways or manners in which he tries to look through his window. Like he stopped, interferes. He वहीं से कहेगा मैं तीन मारूंगा, गोली मारूंगा. क्या कर से तंतमाया बाहर आया, पीटा था. These all are conditions for punishment are wrong. Law makes. Just go there where I'm trying to take you. वो उसकी liberty है, और उसकी liberty meaningful नहीं है. If these several duties, several laws are not there, additional laws are not there, which places burden on all others. इस केस में burden था ना, इसको चाहिए था, गरीब आदमी था.
Harm principle.
No, it's not harm principle. When we are talking of law or liberty as actual element of law, by which we formulate rules, rough rules, it works like that. Works like that.
The basis of imposing such restriction based on harm principle, if I'm not wrong. To protect the
That is that's analysis.
Exercising liberty itself.
Liberty does not exist or cannot exist with the silence of law. Or if it does exist, it is meaningless. Cannot be. So for one liberty of mine or yours requires many other kinds of law, positive law, to protect its real exercise. Real exercise. Are you able to get to there? Liberty is not an extra legal or only exists under the silence of law. If it exists under the silence of law, it is only. It comes pervades into a state of nature. State of natural अवस्था.
रूल्सों ने एक कैटेगरी डेवलप किया है, नेचुरल लिबर्टी वर्सेस सिविल लिबर्टी. तो उसमें नेचुरल लिबर्टी को कहता है कि जिसमें कोई लॉ ना हो, कोई ड्यूटी ना हो, कोई किस तरह का रेस्ट्रिक्शन ना हो, तो वो नेचुरल लिबर्टी. लेकिन जैसे ही हम ये सारे रेस्ट्रिक्शन लेके आते हैं क्लेम ड्यूटी, इस उसको कन्वर्ट कर देता है सिविल लिबर्टी.
Rousseau's natural liberty is a precondition for developing civil liberty.
Yes.
That is the idea. Natural liberty cannot be brought directly under a legal order. That is the learning problem. Now, my point here is uh, if this is true, explanation of legal analysis of liberty, Sachin, where you are trying to say it goes a different moral or philosophical analysis of liberty, finding connection that is brought, that is borrowed from illegal, from philosophical, when you talk of Berlin, talking, but they are talking in a different realm, not in the realm of positive form. We are talking of positive, we are in the realm of positive. Point is, the way liberty exists in our law. The better example is also, when we talk of jurisprudence, something, don't think of constitution. Hamesha misconceived. Think of CCPL, property law, sale of goods, or similar thing. This better, you can understand it, particularly legal aspect. That is civil. What I'm saying, the way liberty uh, conceptualized, one thing, if this analysis is correct, then these people are wrong. These people are wrong. But at least do not go through to today's working of actual rules. The rules. Right? Now, here, okay, well, what happens when you apply liberty or equality different sections of people? Yeah. I take example generally. Let us take a group for doctors and lawyers. Another group, taxi drivers, drivers. What is the law that applies? With respect to liberty. That will be ultimately benefit for us. So we will have what I would say, perfect. Step in a teach to get. And keep. Yeah, so all of it. What is the rule? You can call particular account. Yes, sir. Take it down. Project complete. That's taking number. Driver is trying to. He has refused to take. उसके लिए भी complaint कर सकते हैं. Yeah, he has charged. He is charging more than that. Yeah. There are many cases where you will find prepaid goods. There would be over there. जिसका नंबर आया उसको जाना और फिक्स रेट पे जाना, पर्ची कट गई, नंबर आया, जाना. So are these their professions? Yes. Taxi drivers profession. It is doubtful. The profession is something five term developed white collars के लिए किया जाता है. तो यूनिफॉर्म पर जब आप डॉक्टर्स के पास जाते हैं, लॉयर्स के पास, उनको कोई can you complain if he refuse? It's ethical mistake. First doctors to me is happy. There is presence of law, there is absence of law. For one group, there is presence of law. But इससे ज़्यादा तुम कुछ नहीं कर सकते. इससे ज़्यादा तुम कुछ जान नहीं सकते. For lawyers and doctors, there will be more classes. There is absence of law. So you are free to do it. But free to do anything. कई बार आपने हॉस्पिटल में देखा आपने डॉक्टर को बहुत क्या तुमने टांग भी लगा चलो तुमने अपराध that's what I'm saying that the way can Article 14 answer this dichotomy? Can classification, reasonable classification, solve this problem satisfactorily? Yes, I do. This is one example. It multiply. And then we think that there is equality and there is liberty in the country. But I'm saying there is no equality for reason. Namesake. What is there is liberty. And it acquires predatory character. What happens in this example, that what Bucks is saying, if you read his book called Future, that's the third chapter. It clearly advocates that there are some human rights, there are some market-friendly human rights. Market-friendly human rights. There are human rights which confers lawful right, which confers rights upon some to inflict lawful harm on all others. All others. Rights that confers right on some to inflict lawful harm on others. Look at in this field, then look, lawyer 15 लाख charge कर रहा है या 5 लाख charge कर रहा है एक दिन. How much proportion of Indian population can afford 1% or less than 1%? Maximum. बाकी कहाँ जाएंगे जो 1000 वाला है. But when it comes to the next article, so liberty का तो there is no liberty. What is happening? To look from the point of view of Article 14. Article 14, then equality is gone in favor of liberty. And liberty of doctors, engineers, or lawyers, or journalists, or even enemy. To be that was entry a way principle legitimizes in that. They give it as the thing like government violence. It's done in systematic manner. It's done in a systematic manner. And psychologically, it is very difficult to discern or perceive. So, what is happening? Liberty is eating up the world. Yeah. That liberty exists in competition law. That liberty exists in property law. That liberty exists in company law. That rule. This is company law. It's a trade law. So, it simply exists to swallow up substance of it. Whatever substance may tend to indirect discrimination law. I think इसको समझ लो ये क्या direct है, ये indirect है, which is perverse. Any indirect discrimination, cultural or gender bias, pervasive, but this is this covers the entire society. That's so in that sense, liberty, freedom has its synthesizing character also. Very nice statement is given. Different the related to freedom of thought. Freedom of thought. At that time, property was a noun. So that's what it says. Liberty and property demands. Words get there. Property generate कर रहा है और क्या? There is a very nice writer Charles Reed. They wrote an article about that article is called New Property. A new property. The prospect chances of putting that through governmental largest may be positive or negative. Especially यहाँ तो चुपचाप बैठा रहे या तो थोड़ा यहाँ negative. So, this one of the party says that property and liberty both demands each other and support each other. Cannot live. Okay? This is the exact sentence they have used. The idea of property, their liberty demands each other and support each other. एक के बिना दूसरा. Is there a definition of property in any law?
So actually, it does not. It isn't as a concept. In fact, transfer of property even does not talk about
What is
property. It only talks about transfer of property. How it can be transferred.
Why is it done? Transfer of property or immovable property?
So it defines transfer of property in section 5. However, the whole act does not define what is property.
Somewhere immovable property.
It defines, but that is also an
Inclusive.
exclusive definition. Exclusive. Says
So
it does not include standing timber, growing crops and grass. It even does not define. So we take help from Registration Act and General Clauses Act.
and the general project also says why property is not defined.
With help of it defines benefits rising out of earth and things attached to it. That is what we read in reference to immovable.
That's not the
Attached includes things embedded in it.
there are many things that is times students several profession another by but has and philosophers with the idea of property become approves it. That's the precedent. Property. When it is defined, comes diligence. Michael Sandel says that he thinks के बाहर mother will speak them. That can be object of sale and purchase or property. This is a general practice, I think. It's very India, but I know. But what you can buy? What are the something? So, इधर डिफाइन किया होता है तो हमेशा से बना have lobbying agencies आपको प्रोटेस्ट करना है तो 100 भिखारी को जाकर खड़ा करना स्ट्रीट वाइज democracy between everything. So where to stop this? Idea is left to this the reduction to the engagement. Why it is left? Circumscribed. We have right to property, but what we have, we don't have. We have a right. So right is have a right to property, and the ways and means in which that can be created, increased, multiplied. That is part of the definition of rights, not the property. Idea of right, it's the idea of man. Idea of right. So, if Guru wants to know मैं मेरा कुछ ना तो बहुत से तो property में property का कुछ liberty में liberty का कुछ नहीं. It is coming from that can be manipulated. Every they knew that, sir. Being that scholars, right? Some do find expression positive. So it is happening through idea of life, not to that specific idea. Kind of, it's all happening through right. We always started from idea of property. Yeah, but this is all legislations are going to be or till we talk throughout our regulation. Very difficult to learn anything from him. Till we are conscious of our entitlements in modern sense or rights. अभी कहते हैं good life. We are talking of good life. नहीं होता झगड़ा, war, jealousness. जो आदमी jealous होगा कुछ ना. This system of that. Competition or that's all. Any question? अगर आपने पूछे तो
So the Indian context, you said that the property belongs to a person who is actually, or title belongs to a person who is actually have the possession of the property. That is the subject, not the state. Whereas in Western concept, the property belongs to the state. Ultimately. If we go with the examples of the development done by Ashoka, and in the modern time, Shesha Suri, in what capacity they actually impose the land acquisition? I'm talking about the eminent domain in context of it. Because if we say that the property belongs to the person, then the state has no right to acquire the land.
by permanent settlement. That what is called not ordinary. उससे पहले क्या था? पेट्रियट नहीं देता, मोटरसाइकिल दिखा था वही था करना था, आगे बढ़ा, बेसिक्स, पेट्रियट, बस वो वाले चीज़, अमेरिका,
movie.
हाँ, पेट्रियट में, से खड़ा था, इतना became independent, वो यहाँ, right, 1785. Was a great supporter of trade. He found several Philip Francis and supported them. Had simple idea until and unless this system of land in India that already दिखाया था बहुत कंप्लीट. या उस तरह के रिपोर्ट्स दिखाया था ये नहीं हो सकता ना. Determine that we have age market economy in India, and then only we can it's permanent settlement of land was meant only for this. There is huge number of documentation why it was done. was not done for convenience of revenue. That is a secondary idea. And at that point of time, ownership idea, individual ownership idea, detached away from that from the past was individual ownership was granted to jamindars. Only qualified by a clause that if you fail to pay the annual revenue, it will be sold to others. But only government has this stage. So that's how they started. Individual ownership in land started to commodify that the land or patches of land become sellable. So incentivize farmers and brought the idea of so that without competition, it cannot.
So before that, as I asked earlier, suppose at the time of Ashoka, they wanted to build a monument or a place to worship something. So in what capacity? At that time, they acquired the land.
That's an area. This
Because people were not bound to give their land to them if eminent domain was not there.
so that the wasteland belonged to them. When Ashoka used to take land from some village, some person.
और कोई भी खुशी से नहीं देता. I personally believe. कभी भी ऐसा नहीं.
Majority of land belonged to the state. So majority of land, even in those periods, belonged to king because of irrigation and not under cultivation, not under occupation. So the majority of land, population not come. So that might have facilitated. This is the surmise.
लेकिन जब शेरशाह सूरी ने रोड बनाया, कंटिन्यूएशन ऑफ रोड तो पॉसिबल नहीं हो सकता.
That is
कहीं ना कहीं से कल्टीवेटेड लैंड से दूसरा होगा. By saying that the eminent domain comes from the west, are it possible we are wrong in this state?
The land of the village. Then the king itself relocates the entire village to another land which is newly got or king has got the cultivation. Still that वहाँ पे system अलग.
They felt that he was
Most part में ये we cannot see in this. The court meeting. It's a complaint. Some parts that may be true. There are debates. So that compelled even Kadwalis to their body. Not entirely that was one of the reasons.
आज भी सर झारखंड में और छत्तीसगढ़ में अलग अलग पैटर्न है गवर्नेंस के. कहीं न कहीं किसके एक्सपोजर से पहले से ज्यादा हो गया तो अलग तरह का. तो plurality was there. There cannot be fixed. कई जगह पे ये भी
कस्टमरी लॉज, जैसे पंजाब में जो लैंड का सिस्टम है, इट इज स्टिल गवर्न्ड बाय कस्टमरी लॉज. जैसे विलेज में कॉमन लैंड है, कुछ बंजर लैंड है, कुछ इंडिविजिबल लैंड है, तो अभी थोड़ा सा खत्म होना शुरू है. अदरवाइज पहले इवन आफ्टर पार्टीशन ऑल्सो एंड टीपी इज नॉट एप्लीकेबल टू स्टेट ऑफ पंजाब. तो वहाँ पे कस्टमरी लॉ से ही पूरा लैंड सिस्टम गवर्न होता है, बिकॉज इट इज हाईली.
Legislation has been the subject of state. States have right to
यस
litigate.
मैम, पर हाँ, पर कुछ गवर्नमेंट ने बनाया है.
Himachal, we have land revenue laws dealing with the transfer of certain properties such as agriculture property. जैसे आपके वहाँ का concept है ना, it's Himachal has borrowed it from Punjab, so we have Abadi Day.
यस मैम.
That concept exists.
यस.
आजकल हम इंफॉर्मेशन कैपिटलिज्म की बात, तो इंफॉर्मेशन एक प्रॉपर्टी हो गई है, लेकिन इन रियलिटी आप कह रहे हैं कि प्रॉपर्टी कुछ है ही नहीं. ये राइट के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ग्रो करता है, और ये कह सकते हैं कि एक्सपेंडिंग एम्पायर ऑफ राइट्स है. उस सेंस में जो डेटा है उसका अपना कोई वैल्यू नहीं है जब तक वो राइट तो प्रोटेक्ट प्रोडक्ट that's it for
I want to take the legend of two dogs. Since we have created one, they will try to image on that can utilize you. Sometimes once we have created some accounts, we have given up our rights. They are the serious behaving like a serious.
that's where I told the everyone is gone. So right here. Yeah, that's
They say that state right is someone has a and another person is facilitating exercise of that. Then facilitator must not be present. But when the Supreme Court said that a woman has a right to, but if anyone facilitated or providing slavery, that will
yeah. Yeah. Space. But that is. See. First. Protection is another.
That's all for today. Have lunch.
Yes.